I'm snowed in again for the second time this week. So I figured it's the perfect time to edit part 2. Even after finishing part 1, I still have a lot that I want to say about so many games and different topics. I wrote a lot down in my text document trying to organize this script, so I finally slimmed it down to 5 different parts. Opening thoughts and miscellaneous games, my favorite games of the last year, games I've played since the new year, upcoming games that I'm really excited for, and finally, some closing thoughts. The next game on my list I thought was going to be a slam dunk, that I was going to put it in my favorite section, because I really liked Respawn's idea of what a Star Wars action game could be, but EA pushed it out the door too soon. So I'm glad I rented this. Just take a look at this clip, you'll understand. If you keep up with games at all, you've already heard way too much about Starfield and Tears of the Kingdom, so I'll make this quick. I can't believe Bethesda spent so much time and money to do so little. That's going to stay with me for a while. In Tears of the Kingdom, it doesn't always encourage you to be very creative as much as it should, but the times that it does are really fun. I just wish the game was on something other than the Switch. Months ago, I made a quick and dirty shitpost about all the farming games that I saw at the Summer Games Fest and other game shows. And Palia was one of the games featured in that video, but I tried Palia, and my bee, it's actually got something going for it. All the different activities like tilling, watering your crops, cooking, are immediately more satisfying than what other cozy games do, where you just click on tiles and get the items you need. And there's a unique activity that I want to point out. Cake parties. In the game, when you're making a recipe in Palia, as long as you are involved in one step of the whole process, you get the XP and the rewards at the end. So people get together, every person does one part of the recipe, and everybody gets a ton of XP and a cake at the end. So the devs have essentially made an official way to power level and do another activity as a community, so that stood out as really unique and smart. Good stuff, Palia. Cozy games may not always be my thing, but you stand out. Now onto the favorites. Unless you're under a rock, you've heard of Baldur's Gate 3. There's been so much news about it, and for good reason. This game has impressed me in the same way that Larian's previous game, Divinity Original Sin 2, did. Combat, scripting, quests, items, all happening at the same time with 4 players. I don't know how they did it, but it's still so damn impressive. And every patch that they do is an avalanche of text and fine-tuning. But I want to talk more about an RPG that you may not have heard of, called Crystal Project. This game was made by one dude, and it seems like the answer to a question that I've had for a while. Can I find a JRPG that's more open-ended than anything else? I've wanted an RPG for a while that's not tied down so much to a linear path or a certain quest or story like a lot of RPGs that you've played. And finally, with Crystal Project, I found it. And even after you finish playing through the game the normal way, there's still an entire workshop with tons of mods made by the community and a fully fleshed out randomizer in the game, along with a bunch of other options that you can set up the way you want. This game is a hidden gem that really took me by surprise, and if you do like RPGs, I really hope you give it a try. Hi-Fi Rush is another one of those games that makes me really happy that I play games, because I could go on a lot about how satisfying the combos feel and how good in general the combat design is, but this is one of the most confident art directions I've seen in years in a game. Every character, every background, every asset has so much intention for the way that it's colored, animated, and how it matches the rhythm of every level. this really is something so special, and I'm glad that John Johannes got to work on this as director after working on Evil Within for so many years. And hey, speaking of Tango Game Studio, my favorite director, Shinji Mikami, his non-compete recently expired, so we'll see what's up with that soon. These next 3 games are kind of similar to each other in the sense that I have a lot to say about how they iterate on previously established mechanics. Nioh 2, I started playing Nioh 1 because I got really tired of the combat again and again and again in all of the Souls games that I played. I felt the fatigue as I was getting to the end of Elden Ring, so I picked up Nioh. It was fun. Pro tip, you do not play the Nioh games for their level design, that's what you play Souls games for. But then I went on to Nioh 2, and all of the different styles of weapon, the animations, the variety of skills and how you use the different top, middle, and low stances in combat, it's so fun, fast, and addictive. Resident Evil 4 Remake does something incredible in the sense that it takes the original game that, you know, no matter what, will always be one of the GOATs. It will always be one of my favorite games of all time, but it somehow made it better. They clearly did their homework, and they understand why the crowd control of the original game was so fun, and they made all of the enemies so much more interesting to fight. They push each other around, they hit each other, they trip on stairs, you can hit them and make them fall over ledges, you can wall splat them and then combo into a knife takedown, and just so many more little interactions that I'm forgetting. The enemies have been fleshed out so much more, the knife parry is so satisfying to land. You can't just shoot an enemy with a single TMP bullet and then slash at their knees for 10 seconds. So you have to do a lot more to contend with how many enemies are being thrown at you. And when these enemies are combined with the great encounter design that keeps rising to the occasion, the game is really asking you how well you're playing it repeatedly. Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac Games is, again, taking a framework that was already really satisfying and then adding so much more layers onto what was there. The gliding perfectly complements the web swinging physics. You can do a lot more with the physics. You can swing around objects in like 5 more ways than you could before. You can set up your own web lines and then slingshot from those. You can slingshot from the street. The gadgets and abilities aren't as obviously overpowered as the first game, and they're laid out in a much more intuitive way on the controller. By the way, the controller itself, the way that the PlayStation 5 controller does haptic feedback and vibrations might seem like a marketing gimmick at times, and don't get it twisted, it is, but it really complements all of the hits and actions that you do when you're fighting and collecting all kinds of things in the city. And there's something really interesting about how Insomniac re-examined the control scheme that they established and understood where the empty space was. So for example, when you're holding triangle to grab somebody with the web, they realized, well, you're not using L2 and R2, so they gave you the ability to use left and right trigger to ground bounce, fling left, fling right. You'd have so many more avenues of control in this game that makes it incredibly satisfying to get your hands on. What can I say? The action games recently have made me very happy. Now, On Guard is another gem that makes me think of romantic live-action swashbuckling films like The Princess Bride. It makes me think of DreamWorks films. It's all the right tones, music, witty banter, and colors wrapped into a small, fun package. Being as smart as you can and using the environment and kicking people into things is very satisfying. The swordplay feels smooth. Now, the game might be short. I can say that as a criticism, but to me, I think that so many games easily overstay their welcome, so On Guard being a very short 3-hour experience is really refreshing to me. I love On Guard because it doesn't only feel good, but it gives you such a well-condensed and realized fantasy in such an elegant way. Little Gator Game has the same vibes as A Short Hike, not just because it leans more towards casual play and it's on a small island and it's short, but because it gives you surprisingly satisfying movement in this small toy box. For example, in this clip, I figured out how to combine the balloons and bubblegum with the ragdoll ability, and you can just speedrun the hell out of this game when you finally understand the movement. Really, this is one of the most satisfying games to 100% that I've ever played. Little Gator Game is another must-play from me. Now, for a roundup of the games that I played since the new year. Pseudo Regalia is so great when it folds its muscle memory into your brain. It starts out a little slow when you're first gathering up all the different abilities, but when you get used to all the abilities, you learn the layout of the castle, and especially when you reach my favorite area, the Twilight Theater, the vibes are immaculate. Miscellaneous is a small bite-sized experience, but if you're in the mood for a weird twist on generated platforming and puzzle solving, take a look. Let me up, let me the fuck up. Yes! Oh. Jusan is a weird departure for Don't Nod because you probably know them for Life is Strange, but this is a contained, short, relaxing climbing experience. It's interesting to look at the old concepts for the game where they involve the shoulder buttons for your feet rather than just the hands on the triggers, but overall it was pretty good. Not bad. Like a Dragon Gaiden, well, there's not too much to say. If you like Yakuza games, Like a Dragon games, you'll be right at home. Just as a tip, Agent Mode is most useful in Extreme Heat Mode, where you can clear out huge groups of enemies really quick, and the gadgets actually become useful. Though I will say, using the spider wire to pull someone in and then kick them away is really sick. Now, of all the games that I've tried recently, Cobalt Core might be the most impressive. I like my card-based games, I like roguelikes, but Cobalt Core is enough of a new twist that I've just come back to it again and again. Your ship's movement, the enemy ship's movement, and planning around all their attacks, the middle lane with meteorites, drones, and all kinds of debris, a huge amount of cards, your deck being mixed up by the ship that you use and the characters that you choose to bring into your runs make this a very replayable game. The one criticism I have is that it has a good amount of content, but it doesn't have a ton of content, so you may not get hundreds of hours out of this, not that you need to, but here's hoping that more updates are on the way and maybe some workshop functionality is tied in to Cobalt Core. Big recommendation from me. Now, onto the upcoming games of 2024. Suikoden 1 and 2 getting remasters, and Yoshitaka Murayama coming back for what is essentially a modern Suikoden game with Eiyuden Chronicle makes me really optimistic already for this year. For all we know, Capcom might hit another home run with Dragon's Dogma 2. Expanded classes, expanded enemy behaviors, please let this live up to the hype. Infinite Wealth is coming, you know the drill. It's another Like a Dragon game, so not much to say. Rise of the Ronin is coming to PS5 exclusively, and I just have to say, it feels like Team Ninja just released Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. How are they making these games this fast? Knock on wood? No delays, Black Myth Wukong will finally come in August, and we'll finally get to see what a big AAA title from China looks like. Alone in the Dark is not something I'm necessarily excited for, but I'm curious to see how they're going to realize the idea of Alone in the Dark. Maybe they'll finally get it right after all these years. But I find it really funny that when this releases, we're going to have on Steam Alone in the Dark, and Alone in the Dark. It's the Holy Trinity. Penny's Big Breakaway might be the indie gem of 2024. It has fast trick chaining, yo-yo based platforming, Bauhaus German aesthetics, and T-Lopes is on the soundtrack, so you know it's going to be really good. Take a listen. But then we have to talk about the fighting games. The future of platform fighters is not entirely certain. We don't know when Rivals 2 is coming or Combo Devils, but when they do eventually come, I can't wait to see how they mix up the formula of platform fighting. And Multiverses is a weird case because it feels like I borrowed a skateboard. I had fun with it more than I thought I would, but then the guy who sold it to me came back to my house and said, whoa, I gotta take this into the shop. You haven't seen its final form yet. And here I am just sitting here like, I understand what happened, but I'm still confused. So I hope that whatever form they bring Multiverses back in is a lot better than what they showed before. I almost forgot that Under Night 2 is coming out a day before Tekken 8. Here's hoping that Tekken 8 doesn't take too many sales away from Under Night, though I don't know how big the crossover is between anime fighter and 3D fighting fans. As for things way farther away on the horizon, we're still not sure when Project L is going to drop, but the thing I might be looking forward to the most is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Do not mention remake or rebirth around me, I will not shut up. Even with the weird pacing on some of the segments in Remake, the game and the Intergrade DLC did so much right. The casting, voice acting, music, combat design, special effects. At the best moments, the game is firing on all cylinders and is unforgettable to me. So to think that Rebirth is going to somehow be even better with its combat system is, I don't know, I can't wait. We're approaching the 20-minute mark, so I've got to start wrapping this up. It's easy to feel bad about an industry that rewards a lot of manipulative practices. Even worse, that we were hit with literally thousands of layoffs last year. Even in this month alone, we've been hit with thousands more. But after looking at the sheer variety of games on the Steam Winter Sale, and then visiting itch.io, looking at this wall of new games, hundreds of projects that show up every day on the website, it's a collection of people throwing everything they can at the wall, shitposting, messing up, and maybe stumbling upon something that really is truly new. On Guard started as a rough student project made by 8 people. Pseudo Regalia was done for a game jam by 1 person. Both of those games became some of my absolute favorites in recent memory. So what I'm trying to say is, don't stop looking in as many places as you can for the next thing that isn't just good or weird, but is one of the best games you've ever played. Thanks for watching.